Fire, light the sky, your spirit is one with me. Your wings stand by the ocean, your eyes see everything. Sliders of your motions can make a compass swing. Yet in all your might and glory, vanished from the sky. It's just another story. Experience of man-made life. They tell of how you fell from the sky. Your once proud beauty. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host. I am Clay Douglas. We just got in a report today about the Southern Poverty Law, and at the risk of repeating myself, I'll share it with you, but I've been telling you what Southern Poverty Law and the ADL and APAC does and has been doing for years. Fundraising must be down at Southern Poverty Law Center because the KKK and skinhead groups are a distant memory. I'll beat them to the punch with their armed and dangerous. But the folks at Southern Poverty Law work feverishly to keep that money rolling in. So their new phantom targets are far-right hate groups, says Mark Potok, the so-called senior fellow at SPLC, probably the one that hasn't had his divorce papers released by me, like Morris D's. Mark Potok wrote this in spring 2013 intelligence report, capping 4 years of explosive growth sparked by the election of America's first black president and anger over the economy. Number of conspiracy-minded anti-government patriot groups reached an all-time high of 1,360 in 2012, while the number of hardcore hate groups remained about 1,000. As President Obama enters his second term with an agenda of gun control and immigration reform, the rage on the right is likely to intensify. Richard Cohen, President CEO of the SPLC, sent a letter to Attorney General Holder and Secretary Janet Napolitano of the Department of Homeland Security with this outrageous charge. Because of the looming dangers, we urge you to establish an interagency task force to address the adequacy of the resources devoted to responding to the growing threat of non-Islamic domestic terrorism. A patriot group is identified as a group of individuals who are opposed to gun control and immigration reform, both of which are constitutional issues. So, if you stand against the president or other anti-Second Amendment advocates, then you are a conspiracy-minded anti-government patriot. If immigration reform means advocating amnesty for illegal aliens who will be used as political fodder for the Democratic Party, then you are a conspiracy-minded anti-government patriot. The SPLC is in the fundraising business. They have to create straw man targets in order to keep the checks coming in. And of course, the SPLC had to make its report about race, the election of America's first black president, but in the same report, Potok mentions the anti-government sentiment over gun control goes back to the 1990s when Bill Clinton was president. While Clinton was touted as America's first black president, he is white as the driven snow. I suspect he was described as our first black president so that the criticism against his liberal policies could be labeled racist. Now, one of the actions of the far-right militia groups, it wasn't militia groups that killed people in Aurora, Colorado movie theater, or the elementary students in Newtown, Connecticut. No, those were more likely Israeli Mossad or UN hit teams. In fact, there hasn't been a single far-right militia group incident since Obama's been president. We know that Floyd Lee Corkins, who opened fire at the Family Research Center Council, injuring a guard before he was subdued, was not a far-right militia type. In fact, he was in full agreement with the hate group label stamped on many conservative groups. Tom Perkins, president of the FRC, pleaded the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group label as a contributor to Corkins' actions. After Corkins pleaded guilty, Perkins said the following: "The day Floyd Corkins came into the FRC headquarters and opened fire, wounding one of our team members, I stated that while Corkins was responsible for the shooting, he had been given a license to perpetrate this act of violence by groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has systematically and recklessly labeled every organization with which they disagree as a hate group." Today, both assertions were validated in court as Corkins pleaded guilty to multiple criminal charges, including terrorism. Southern Poverty Law can no longer say that it is not the source for those bent on committing acts of violence. Only by ending its hate labeling practices. Will the SPLC send a message that it no longer wishes to be a source for those who would commit acts of violence that are only designed to intimidate and silence Christians and others who support natural marriage and traditional morality? SPLC never lists leftist groups as hate groups. It's only organization and groups on the so-called right of the political social spectrum. When homosexual groups targeted people who supported California's anti-homosexual marriage Proposition 8, the SPLC remains silent. The SPLC is nothing more than a fundraising machine for leftist causes and high salaries for leftist propagandists. And basically, they are still fudging on this. They're not talking about the Jewish communists. And the SPLC would paint a box of Wheaties as an extremist threat if they thought it would help raise funds. All right. All right. I'm going to bring Dr. Jake Wade up in just a little while. But let's talk about this. Are Attorney General Holder's statements on banks and drones connected? How far will the government go to defend the too big to fail banks? After a 13-hour filibuster by Senator Paul asking for a yes or no answer, the Attorney General finally said that drones would not be used to kill U.S. citizens who are not engaged in combat. Or did he? The Attorney General of the United States made the following two statements within 48 hours. The president can assassinate American citizens on U.S. soil. And he said the big banks shouldn't be prosecuted as that would destabilize the economy. These statements may at first glance, seem unconnected, and the mainstream media is treating them as separate. True, the government is hell-bent on keeping the giant banks afloat, even though virtually all independent economists, financial experts, and bankers are calling for them to be broken up, and Americans overwhelmingly want the government to get tougher on prosecuting Wall Street fraud. But there might be more to it than that, and Holder's statements may be intimately connected. For example, the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and other government agencies worked hand in hand with the big banks to violently crack down on the Occupy protest. And what was Occupy protesting? One of the core complaints of the Occupy protesters was that there are two systems of justice. The little guy gets thrown in jail for the smallest infraction, while banksters escape prosecution for their criminal fraud. Occupy also protested the fact that the big banks got bailed out while the rest of us got sold out. In other words, it's exactly the Department of Justice policy for not persecuting big bank crimes, which was one of Occupy's core complaints. And in response, the federal government sending the goons to crackheads and trash the free speech rights of the protest. This is not an isolated incident. The big banks literally own the politicians. For many years, the government has used anti-terrorist laws mainly to crush political dissent and help the too big to fail businesses. Asking questions about Wall Street shenanigans, speaking out against government policies, and protesting anything are all considered grounds for being labeled a potential terrorist by the government. Whistleblowers and journalists are also treated as terrorists. Indeed, the government agency with the power to determine who gets assassinated is the same agency that is at the center of the ubiquitous, unaccountable surveillance state aimed at American citizens. If this sounds like fearless, breathless fear-mongering, please remember that the U.S. military now considers the American homeland to be a battle zone. And again, folks, I told you about that years ago when I filmed the first Homeland Security meeting, and Colonel John Brinkerhoff told us that we were going to be we were in a war. This war would be fought on homeland, on American soil, and the enemy was weak. The enemy didn't have tanks. The enemy didn't have planes. The enemy didn't have that, so they would use unconventional tactics. I told you that. True face of FEMA. He also told you, and I had it in my film, in case of a major disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake of sufficient magnitude, we'd need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops to control the American people, because some of them just wouldn't follow orders. And that's what they are doing now. All right, let's see what we can do here. Let's see if this works. Nope. Good morning, Jake Wade. How are you? Soil, and the big banks shouldn't be prosecuted, as that would destabilize the economy. And it's
whose economy are we talking about?
well, it looks like we're talking about the banks. He was also in this article that I was
The
sharing.
economy of this country is shaky now. I don't know how you say it's going to unstabilize it. How unstable can it get?
Well, they were talking about the Occupy protesters that the Department of Homeland Security and FBI worked hand in hand with the big banks to violently crack down on the Occupy protest. And what they were protesting was the two systems of justice. The little guy gets thrown in jail for the smallest infraction, while the bankers escape prosecution for their criminal fraud. And the fact that the big banks got bailed out while the rest of us got sold out. Now, I've said this numerous times, and on my radio show here, that as George Bush was walking out, and of course with George Bush and Bill Clinton all did the same things as Obama is doing here. They set the stage for Obama. They set the stage for what I think is a communist takeover. And what we've been kind of dumbed down here, since I do teach political science, and I am the head of the political science department of your college, Timothy Bible College. It's the government agencies are working for the banks. The banks are ripping off the people right and left, and what they have done is create a police state here in America. I said anytime a man with a badge can walk up to you and say, what's that I smell? Is that marijuana? Have you been smoking marijuana? You got marijuana in that car? Then you live in a police state. If you can go to jail for possessing some of God's green earth in your pocket and you're not harming anyone, then why are we being thrown in jail made to the tune of 50 million people?
You know I don't smoke marijuana, right?
That's right. I know that. Yes, sir.
Years ago, when I had my engineering business in Houston, Texas, I was pulled over because I was driving my brother's van at the time, and it had curtains on the windows and was purple. That's why they pulled me over, and they wanted to do a search of the van. I was like driving that van, and when I came out, I had a suit on and smoking a cigar, and at the time I had a briefcase in there, and little did I know my brother had stash in there. I didn't, and I was pulled over because of the look of the van, and that should be blatantly illegal in what we call a free country. And I told the cop that. I said, you pulled me over because I appear to be driving a van, which maybe is not something you would approve of yourself. It's not my van. It happens to belong to my brother, and I don't do marijuana or drugs of any kind. In fact, I don't even take aspirin. And the guy said, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry," and apologized, and I went on. But the idea that, it's just what you said, the idea of being able to pull me over because I didn't look right, and this was years ago before they started fussing about profiling. But I've got another question for you, Mr. Douglas.
Go right ahead, sir.
Am I mistaken, or has our administration now put into motion the act of saying they're going to have drones flying over this country that can take you out without having even been indicted by some jury of your peers?
Yes, sir. Now, Rand Paul, who may and not be on our side, other than the fact that he's a Ron Paul son, and that he did not back his father. He backed Mitt Romney, who was a Zionist pretender, or sponsored by the whole Zionist movement. Uh, I don't know what Iran is doing, but he did a filibuster to supposedly opposing the use of drones in America. But they've already had incidents of drones threatening aircraft, flying too close to commercial airliners, and I think the idea that they could use these to surveil us is as bad as allowing the NSA to tap everybody's phones, which is what they
Well, and
did
they're
to.
designed to take out humans.
Yes, sir. We are in now. I just talked about that. We were talking about the police. Before the show started, I did a piece about some people did some interviews with police, and what do we do if somebody's breaking in our house? Well, call us 911. How long does it take you to get there? Well, just 2 or 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, depends on traffic. Well, what are we supposed to do till you get here? You and I know the answer. You're kicking in my door, and just as Joe Biden says, blow him off with a shotgun. But if you wave that shotgun around and you carry that shotgun onto your balcony and fire off a couple of rounds or wave it around, then you can be prosecuted. You can be arrested for what they call menacing.
And if you don't kill a guy and just maim him, you could end up not only in prison but paying restitution for his injury.
That's right. It's but this back to this bankers and Attorney General Holder. It's the Department of Justice's policy of not prosecuting big bank crimes, which was one of Occupy's core main complaints, and in response, or a hurricane or a natural disaster along the New Madrid Fault, for instance, of major significance, we'll need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained troops to control the American people, because some of them just won't follow orders. And I've told people again that the war on terror is a war against anyone, anywhere that doesn't want to go along with one world government, one world banking. The Council on Foreign Relations, the UN has all made that pretty clear. And that's where we are right now. They are making us with these and the drones and the armored vehicles with the too thick glass side windows. They're being unloaded. They're being shipped into this country. They're being brought into this country, and they've even got some foreign troops that showed up like at places like Sandy Hook. They could be Russian. They could be Israeli.
Well, I don't like to be overly political, as you know, but my read on this is, who are they afraid of? Oops, it's we who are legally carrying weaponry. We have various weapons ourselves, generally just to protect our home. I've got a shotgun that I would probably use on a coyote before anything else, but I'm capable of pretty good shot. And I don't want to advise anybody to come get my gun, but most of us who have guns are not interested in taking on the U.S. government. But it appears to me that we are who they're afraid of.
You're absolutely right. And I also want to mention, we really have answers for this. There's new technology that I'm going to be including in my next article that is probably the equivalent of the internet. Now, what happened with the internet is it gave us the ability to learn. It's almost like being able to, it's as it is above, so it is below. And up above, we know God is as the international, the cosmic mind. He omniscient and omnipotent. He knows everything, knows anything's going to happen, knows what's going on. And the internet has almost given us that capability. And it's given us the ability to communicate and to learn and to research. And that's almost backfired on them. Without the internet, without the computers, they wouldn't be able to run their little banking scam, their credit card scam, their debit card scam. And the double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword.
You have a statement on your web page right now that I think it's on there where you've even announced that I'm going to be your guest for a little bit today. That says "Take action now."
Yes, sir.
And I think that's critical. All we're talking about, all that you're bringing up, all that the truth seekers put out, all that the whistleblowers are saying is, for the most part, true, and it doesn't need to be much of it to be true for it to create the necessity for taking action. But it is, we are in bad shape. We're in a better get going posture in this country, and those of us who know the truth are going to have to lead and do something to resist this, whether it be the Republic of Texas coming out and actually, standing on their own, or pastors doing that, which I don't see happening. People like you and me, there may not be enough of us, but I do believe there are enough Christian patriots in this country that would like to have the country back and consider the direction of this country to be absolutely wrong. But I look back at Job. In the 3rd chapter of Job, Job is talked to by one of his so-called friends, but he actually says some pretty good things relevant to nowadays. He's saying, okay, you're in a bad shape. You've lost all your kids, you lost your house, you lost all your stuff, you're destitute, you're sitting on a pile of garbage, and your boils are so bad. And by the way, I just had something like that in the middle of my back. They ain't fun. He had them all over his body, but the point is, he was in terrible shape. And this so-called friend came up to him and made some pretty good comments and said, boy, at some point in your background, you may be good as gold now. You may be a Christian patriot. You may be belonging to God. You may have taught all of us at the time, and you may have said the right thing. But at some point in your life, you may also be paying for some things you did that you shouldn't have done. And the reason I bring that up is if you look at us, you and I have tried for nearly 20 years to get this thing turned around. We believe that education is critical to it, that getting the truth out is critical to it. It's also critical, like you always say, to keep hope out there. But we have to get off our butts and actually do something.
Well,
We look back, and you and I both can tell people, though I'd rather we didn't, some of the reasons we may be paying a price physically or financially or whatever now from our past. Everybody's got that, and that's what this friend of Job was saying. You've got some stuff in your past. Don't think you're just better than everybody else. And I think that's where our people need to be. We've killed babies in this country. We are abusing our children in what they call public schools. We have a failed education system, a failed judicial system, and a failed church system. And here we sit and we blame people like those we have allowed into Washington when we're really in the place where we ought to say, okay, let's take our licks. We got ourselves into this mess. We didn't stand up when we should have, but we ought to stand up now and do something and say, no more. We ain't going to keep doing this.
now, the reason I got involved in this whole Patriot movement was because I was outraged with the what happened in Waco. 17 little children killed, their families killed, their parents killed, for basically having a well-armed, self-sufficient family farm, which is what I envisioned Liberty Village becoming. And I've also, I conceived of Liberty Village because I had 5 acres out in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. But the whole concept for the Liberty Village came about because I wanted to know, and I thought that we needed an answer. I had been reporting since 1994, I've been reporting on this radio show, the takeover, the words of the New World Order. Now we can see a new world coming into view. Henceforth, we pledge allegiance to the United Nations. I mean, that was George W. Bush telling us that. I was outraged by what happened in Waco. I was screaming at the television, sitting on my boat in Miami. Well, where's the Texas Rangers? Where's the Sheriff Department? Where's our DPS? Why are they letting this happen? Why are they letting this happen?
The sheriff there sat and watched it.
Yes. And suddenly, because I started the militias, because I started my magazine and this radio show, I've been attacked, demonized, and tried to marginalize. And in doing my research in the history, this is what happens every time a communist regime takes over. Now, I don't know whether, as some rabbis say, like Rabbi Weiss, some call it communism, I call it Judaism for the masses. We're talking about complete control over everything you do. And the Bible warned us about that, but for 2,000 years, we sat around and scratched our head. What's the mark of the beast? What could that be? I can't buy or sell without it? No, that's gotta be crazy. No, we can't do that. They're not gonna do that. What are they talking about? Well, it took 2,000 years for technology to catch up with the Bible. And folks, what you're witnessing here, and what I've got, matter of fact, I've got one of the people in my chat room that sent a donation, and I sent him a copy of Mystery Babylon, which you've read, which is part of the curriculum of Timothy Bible College.
Right.
And It's got the history of the Rothschild, the history of the bankers, and it also, in that book, I refer to the whole Rothschild banking thing that we're seeing right now, that Occupy was protesting against. Control of our money, and our founding fathers warned us. Thomas Jefferson said, if you ever allow a private bank to issue your money, the banks and the corporations that spring up around them will leave your children homeless in the land that we conquered. We've got over 1 million families homeless this year, thanks to Bush and thanks to and
let me interject something,
ahead,
if I
sir.
might, because
Yes,
I like to have a way of validating some of these things, and I hear people badmouth. First, they badmouth me for using your material in the college, and then they'll badmouth you. Well, where did he get this? You know, he'd be picking up, beating up on some Jew somewhere named Rothschild. Here's what I did early on when I didn't know you very well, and you had anyway decided to help me promote Little Red Schoolhouses because you believed in that concept. I got your magazine and I read the thing on the Rothschilds, and I said, okay, this is really foundational to teaching the truth about what has happened in this country, because it is a banking problem, or it is a money control problem. It is, according to what he says, this is same thing happened in Germany, and that Rothschilds have been orchestrating most of the wars since. And I said, man, that's a pretty broad, uh, touchy statement to make. And I went and researched it. And you can pick up almost any encyclopedia and look up the Rothschild history, and it's in there. It's not just something Clay Douglas made up or a tool you have used all on your own. The dictionary, I mean, the encyclopedias back you up. So it's valid information. The way you've couched it and the way you did it in Mystery Babylon puts all of the chronological data in proper order with some sense of direction. And it's very easy in your book to see how we got where we are and why.
and it all goes back to the money. Lincoln was assassinated because he didn't borrow the money. Kennedy was assassinated because he issued United States notes.
Well, he was going to take out the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
Well, he got taken out. And I don't think that's a mystery at all.
Now, again, back to the whole Liberty Village concept. I conceived that on 5 acre plot. I thought if we could live together, I asked myself, how did people live 100 years ago, 2,000 years ago? How did they live? How did they live in the Bible? And the Bible, they got the same thing. They got the same problem, had the same problems with Egypt, with Syria, with the governments there that we do today. And as Richard Kelly Hoskins said, you know, the foundation of every civilization is the self-sufficient family farm. I think this world is the garden of Adam and Eve. This is a garden planet. And if you can grow your own food and generate your own electricity, your own power, we did that coming across America. We did it on the farms. We did it in the ranches. I mean, we pumped the water. We put generators on it. We lived like that. And I would like to restore that. And that could be done, Jake. Not just on property, not just on a ranch like you got. That could be done in a neighborhood on one square block. And you could go to yourself and say, we're going to do a sort of a neighborhood watch thing. We want to make people independent. We know the government's told us that in case of an EMP attack, The gas pumps might not work, the credit cards might not work, the computers might not work. So how do we prepare for that? Should we just sit and wait and allow FEMA to send the troops, the 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops in to take care of us? Or should we start planning now? And I suggested just this week that we use the whole Green Beret approach. And I had a Green Beret featured in my film, True Face of FEMA. He asked Colonel John Brinkerhoff, well, you talking about National Guard here, 400,000 National Guard? No, they're too expensive, and they're going to be in some other place. They're going to be in some other place. And like Iraq, like Afghanistan, Garden of Poppies. And why don't you just send us Green Berets out into the small towns, into the rural areas, and we can teach the people how to be self-sufficient and how to take care of them. And again, if you can generate your own power from everything God gave us, the wind and the solar, and you catch the rain on your roof if you don't live in Colorado where it's illegal, you can survive. You can grow your own food, non-genetically modified. And all you got to do is go out and talk to your neighbors, knock on the door. And that just ain't happening. We don't know our neighbors. We're afraid of our neighbors. We do not know how to work together. And I'm the trolls that come in on my chat room while I'm trying to do the show are part of that. They try to divide and conquer. They don't support him. Don't buy his book. Oh, he stole everything. He did this. He did that. Yeah, we stole technology, the idea of windmills from the Dutch. Yeah, we stole that, didn't we? It's insanity. And I frankly don't know, Jake, whether these people, I sat and watched here as somebody I cared a lot about virtually became a troll. Basically turned against me, they did more to hurt me than to help. And I've watched that happen to the militia movement. I've watched it happen to patriot groups. I had one patriot group that were organizing some kind of patriot unity coalition, so that the patriots would work together, so we would have a clearinghouse for information. And it didn't work because they fought with each other. They found everything wrong with this individual or that individual, and this guy said this, and this guy didn't do this, and this guy said this, and nobody ever worked together. And that's what these people on the they aren't trying to organize anybody. They're possibly getting paid so much. They brag to me that they're getting paid to try to shut my show down, to block the internet, to do this, to do that. And I've said that the problem that we have today is basically what Jesus faced. How do you fight evil? And solved. How do you fight evil without becoming evil? Now, I've had guests on just yesterday that basically that helped start the militia before me, that started the militia idea, concept before me, J.B. Campbell. He was on my show yesterday. And he said, they're killing us. They're starving us. There's poisoning us. They're spraying us. Now they got drones. They're organizing the SWAT teams. They've got the double 2-inch thick glass on the tanks that they're putting on the streets of America. It's time we fought back. And if somebody comes and take your gun, and I believe that's what they're going to do, executive order, stroke of the pen, law of the land, you're now a criminal if you own a gun. If you don't turn that gun in, you're in trouble here. You're going to be charged with a crime. And I think that's what they're setting us up for. I've also talked about, we talked about the marijuana thing. They're making it a crime. Remember that Roosevelt did that when you were a kid? They made your parents turn in the gold, or they could have been charged. And so you gave the gold to the banks at $16 an ounce. How much is it now? 2,000, something like that. So again, if we organize one square block, if we went out and talked to our own neighbors and said, look, we're going to turn the backyards into gardens. We're going to help you build a windmill and a wind generator and solar panels up on the up on our roofs. Neighborhood associations will either get with it or not. And then we go to our sheriff and say, Sheriff, we're going to help protect our neighborhood. So there is not that 2 minute or 20-minute response time. When I had my property in New Mexico, if there was a problem, if somebody broke down, if there was an accident, the sheriff called me. And if all of these neighborhoods are armed, we're not going to have looters. We're not going to have any crime. And if we can abolish the laws against victimless crimes and start putting bankers in jail, what we've been doing is putting the wrong people in jail. And by the way, the Bible predicted this, I think, when they talked about the eighth beast. And I think the eighth beast, following Napoleon or Hitler or whoever was the beast du jour, the eighth beast is really the banking scam, the fractional banking scam that is designed to keep us impoverished. They have improved the art of slavery to the point the slave don't know they're slave. I'm not a slave. I can go get in my pickup and go get a beer. Watch. What do you think? Jake, are you with me? Nope. What happened to my... All right, we're trying to get everybody back here. Stayed up on...
Philip?
Evidently, I must have hit a key phrase there and got the two of my lines taken down there. But we're back, Jake. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Again, if we work together, we could stop this. But they don't want you listening to me. They don't want to listen to you. And let me bring another point up here that I think is vital. I don't have any advertisers because people are afraid to advertise with me because one of these trolls will call up and say, "Oh, you're advertising with Free American, man. We're going to tell all of our neighbors not to do business with you anymore. We're gonna blow the whistle on you. You're supporting a Nazi. You're supporting anti-government, racist, anti-Semite." But I do advertise for Timothy Bible College in the Little Red Schoolhouse because, folks, that is really the answer to what happened at Waco, to what happened at Sandy Hook, to what happened at Columbine. We don't need to send our children to go to these gun-free zones where they'd have no protection, where and the colleges today, Jake, if you go into a college library, it's like going into a prison library, and it's like they're training us to follow orders to be good prisoners, if not just good slaves. And be sure to pay your fair share, which is way more than is fair. I put up on my Facebook page the true division of
my bathroom this morning and what our daughter's worth right now.
Now, what about this eighth beast? What about this eighth beast? That what did you are the Bible scholar, and so I bow to your judgment on
There's a lot of visuals of, I hate to use the word symbol because that takes reality out of most people's minds, and it is a real thing, but there is a visual afforded man in the Bible for many of what we refer to as beasts. And a lot of this, if you look at the 4 parts in Daniel of what they call the beast there, are the same kind of thing that are 4-parted in Revelation. These are the attributes or the effects or the characteristics of God as he approaches man. And I think you have the same thing on the other side. You've got one empire, if you will, is the antithesis of the other. And the other guy, you start putting numbers together, of course, you got to be careful with that. But there are groups that have pulled together, and one of them very clearly this European common market. It started with a Revelation biblical number, which was a group of dignitaries. And as you would say, it probably could be really but if you go back to the Pharisees had good banking. In Jesus' time, the Pharisees had banking going on. They had foreign exchange. They had usury and interest and all of those terminologies that we don't like that our current banking people use. The Pharisees were doing that. That's why Jesus tried to clean out his temple, because they were doing this in what was then called the church, and they're doing the same thing nowadays in the current church. If you wrap that eighth beast that you're referring to up into one little package, I would call it the ideology of Babylon. We are in a Babylonian ideology which is clearly a greed and pride driven mindset, and that's why the bankers and the administration of this country and even the whole of Washington gets by with playing Monopoly, because our whole country has been educated and trained for so many generations. We've bought into it, and that's that communist takeover you referred to, as they have torn apart, as Randall Mock always calls this little three-legged stool or whatever. He's taken out the church, the family, education. There you got the collapse of society. They've hit us where we live, and that's where we are.
They have, all of this is no conspiracy theory. My friend Aaron Russo, who happened to be Jewish, talked to Nicholas Rockefeller, and he told him their plan was to chip everybody, to put a little RFID chip in everybody. And that way, if you didn't do what they were supposed to, they could just turn your chip off and you wouldn't be able to buy or sell. And so this, and I've seen the commercial for
it. I think the invitation for Aaron Russo's movie showing on the IRS here in the up in Austin. I did the prayer, the invocation for his presentation in downtown Austin. And he dared this.
Whoop. Did we lose you? Whoop, lost you again here. Hang on. What do we do here? Almost out of time here. Let me see if we can get Jake back. Yeah, we're still trying here, but the Aaron Russo, you did the invocation. Aaron Russo did Mad as Hell and ain't going to take it anymore. Aaron Russo ran for governor. I put him on the cover of my Free American magazine when he ran for the governor. This ain't about anti-Semitism. I don't hate Jews. They have done pretty well controlling us and subverting the Talmudic Jews. Have basically subverted the Christian churches, turned them into Masonic lodges and other manners of atrocities. And they never talk about the Idumeans. They don't ever talk about the Canaanites. They don't talk about the Jews who say they're Jews but are not, or of the synagogue of Satan. We're almost out of time, Jake. I'd like for you to address that, because I've told people I don't care. The Constitution protects you however you want to worship. If you want to beat your head against a Wailing Wall, knock yourself out. I'll watch.
I'll just make it real simple. I am all for you doing your religion like you want it. That is your right. I think the Jews have one of the better religions, and of course it starts with the same place ours does, with the Old Testament of the Bible. My problem with any of these people is that my Bible in total, when it gets to the New Testament, Jesus wrote the whole thing. He says I wrote the whole thing, and he says, without me, you don't get into heaven. That's the bottom line. I don't have anything against the Jew or the Muslim or anybody else. Some of them have, some of their stuff is pretty good on how to have good home life and all that sort of thing. But the bottom line is I want to be in heaven, and I would think anybody else would. And when you separate it that way, you're stuck with Jesus. And that's,
All
you don't
right.
have much time. I'm just going to leave
We're
it
out
at
of
that.
time. We're out of time. We'll let that be the last word. Dr. Jake Way, Timothy Bible College, linked on my site. Do it. Thank you.
Call recording has been completed.
Bye-bye now. Hello. Hello, you called. What do you want? Just an interruption there.